Greetings everyone! Here are the main highlights in today's video, the Night of Terror in Crimea. Ukrainian UAVs delivered a devastating blow, destroying Russia's strategic missile warehouse. The steel net became a useless prop. Ukrainian UAVs broke through the defense line, burning multiple pieces of Russian equipment. The nightmare of Novorossiysk, a historic raid tearing apart the Russian warship fleet. Novorossiysk was thrown into chaos at night. Russian air defense accidentally shot their own comrades. People were in extreme panic. A Mad Max battlefield in the middle of the sea. Russia is desperate, setting up nets to save the supertanker and oil from the UAV storm. The Kremlin is shaken. Trust is collapsing. Fear spreads as a series of cities suddenly turn their backs on Putin. Welcome to the analysis program of Luan Banqian Su. Before we get into the details, we hope you can take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Please also click the subscribe button, especially as the calculated airstrikes hit directly at the opponent's logistical lifeline. The rapidly spreading footage on social media has revealed a scene of devastation and intensity, capturing the moment when the Russian forces' strategic missile and artillery warehouse was completely wiped out by the destructive power of the most advanced equipment. The chain explosions not only lit up the Crimean night with a dazzling and blinding sea of fire, but also revealed the vulnerability of positions once considered impregnable fortresses. According to operational sources, this surprise operation was the result of sophisticated and precise coordination. Veteran pilots from the 422nd Regiment worked side by side with experienced operators from the Special Operations Center of the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, and the Defense Intelligence Directorate, HAB.
Lực lượng phối hợp này đã triển khai dòng
Kukuska attack drone, a weapon that may be small, but is deadly enough to penetrate the early warning system, accurately locates the target and causes a chain explosion, turning the entire ammunition depot to dust in an instant. This raid is clear evidence of Kyiv's pragmatic shift in military doctrine. Ukraine is increasingly betting on long-range drone squadrons and attack UAVs to strike deep into military infrastructure, weapons depots, and vital logistics centers far behind the front lines. This is a systematic strangulation strategy, cutting off supply chains, depleting firepower resources, and breaking Russia's reinforcement capabilities from the rear before they can reach the front lines. Steel barriers have become useless as Ukrainian UAVs penetrate the defenses and destroy numerous Russian equipment along the harsh supply routes crossing the front lines. A tragic contrast of modern warfare is unfolding. The main transportation routes of Russian forces are gradually being covered by steel mesh and massive metal dome structures. Facing the constant threat of suicide drones from Ukraine, the opposing side has been forced to deploy a large number of anti-UAV barriers along troop movement and logistics routes. With the desperate hope of protecting the flow of weapons, ammunition, and mechanized equipment from devastating attacks from above. However, that makeshift defensive wall quickly collapsed in the face of the flexibility of asymmetric warfare tactics. A series of images and field footage spreading across social media have exposed a harsh reality. Many of Russia's armored vehicles and heavy equipment have still been torn apart, engulfed in flames right inside the protective cages after Ukrainian drones easily pierced through the shielding nets. The ingenuity and skillful piloting of Ukrainian UAV crews have turned these seemingly solid structures into useless steel traps where the targets can only helplessly await a thunderous strike. Moscow's continued expansion of anti-drone net installations across the territories it controls reflects the mounting pressure on frontline logistics systems in the face of increasingly frequent enemy attacks. However, the charred remains of vehicles beneath the steel nets serve as a stark warning that makeshift and patchwork defensive measures cannot become a reliable shield against the rapid advances of killer drone technology on the modern battlefield. The Novorossiysk nightmare, a historic raid that tore through the Russian warship fleet. The waters of Novorossiysk, once considered an absolutely safe fortress for the Black Sea Fleet after their retreat from Western bases, have just witnessed one of the largest and most devastating bombardments. A surprise and highly accurate joint assault using missiles and 7 waves of drones pierced the dense defensive network of one of Russia's most heavily guarded military cities. Open-source intelligence analysis from independent monitoring projects like Cyberborosno and Exilenova Plus, along with international military experts, all agree that this is one of the offensive operations that is bold and has achieved a record level of destructive efficiency by the Ukrainian defense forces.
It delivered a critical blow not only to the port logistics infrastructure, but also paralyzed a series of the enemy's main warships right at their anchorage. The destructive power of the strike deeply impacted Moscow's economic and strategic energy arteries. Commercial satellite images recorded severe damage at grain storage and transshipment complexes, especially the elevator-type storage facilities at the NGKP port. This commercial hub accounts for up to 12% of Russia's total grain export output, while nearby terminals like NZT and KSK were fortunate to escape the barrage. Not stopping there, the strike also tore through the crucial Saskaris oil export terminal, hitting directly at the specialized piers that receive large Aframax and Suezmax-class oil tankers.
Huge oil slicks on the sea surface.
Thick columns of smoke and widespread traces of firefighting foam have revealed the severe damage to this energy infrastructure,
along with an Aframax oil tanker that was directly hit while it was anchored.
However, the most tragic and strategically significant scene was at the Novorossiysk naval base, where the most valuable warships of the Black Sea Fleet had to endure a barrage of fire.
Field reconnaissance data confirmed a series of heavy losses.
So stealth frigate Admiral Makarov of Project 11356 was hit directly at the vertical launch cluster of Caliber cruise missiles and the rear superstructure command area housing the core radar system. A warship of the same class, the frigate Admiral SN, also suffered the same fate with significant damage in the missile launch area. Sharing the same tragic fate were a minesweeper of Project 266 and the Special Weapons Research and Testing vessel Viktor Cherekov of Project 20360 OS,
a stealth patrol ship of Project 22160.
The electronic reconnaissance ship Pryasovi of Project 864 suffered damage to its stern. Along with a large dry cargo transport ship, even the coastal infrastructure and the command post of the renowned 4th Independent Submarine Brigade suffered serious damage, turning this base into a devastated battlefield amid smoke and fire.
This historic raid was the climax of an intense airstrike campaign involving hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles,
covering the skies over the entire Krasnodar region, creating a series of alarms stretching from Anapa, Jelenzik all the way to Temryuk district, as confirmed by Governor Veniamin Kondratiev. From a distance of more than 300 kilometers behind the front lines, the lightning strike went beyond all operational expectations and was officially confirmed by President Volodymyr Zelensky as a model long-range coordinated operation.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces deployed a powerful trio of killers into the battlefield, including Palyanitsia jet-powered unmanned aerial vehicles,
improved long-range Neptune cruise missiles, and unmanned suicide boats at sea,
destroying a series of ground-based air defense systems,
paralyzing the docks and crippling the enemy's combat capabilities in a dramatic display of technological power. Novorossiysk was thrown into chaos at night. Russian air defenses mistakenly fired on their own forces, and civilians were in a state of panic. The night in the port city of Novorossiysk was suddenly torn apart by an unprecedented scene of chaos and tragedy as the sky lit up with anti-aircraft fire while the ground suffered heavy losses. Faced with the massive attack involving hundreds of Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles targeting strategic sites across the Krasnodar region, the Russian air defense network in this vital port city seemed to become overloaded and disoriented. Numerous images and real footage shared by local residents have revealed a harsh reality. Instead of effectively intercepting long-range UAV sorties, many interceptor missiles, which were already nearing or past their service life, went off course and crashed straight into residential areas and apartment buildings, leaving the residents of Novorossiysk shocked and deeply confused by the phenomenon of accidentally firing on their own side. The strike on Novorossiysk's port infrastructure, especially the grain storage and export transfer silo system, was a calculated move. This is an effort to deplete the massive foreign currency revenue that Moscow uses to sustain its war machine. However, the price paid on the ground is tragic, as debris from air defense fire and UAVs falls over a wide area. Local authorities in western Krasnodar confirmed that the airstrike killed 2 people and injured at least 12 others.
Among them, Mayor Andrei Krepchenko bitterly announced that in Novorossiysk alone, 1 child died, 8 people were injured, and 4 businesses along with 21 residential buildings were severely damaged.
At the same time, Governor Veniamin Kondratiev also reported additional casualties, with 1 person killed and 4 injured in nearby areas due to debris damaging civilian structures. Despite statements about secondary damage from the local authorities, Kyiv insists that their core objective is to cripple the Novorossiysk naval base, a key stronghold and the last remaining fortress of the Black Sea Fleet. President Volodymyr Zelensky has publicly confirmed the coordinated precision operation carried out from hundreds of kilometers away,
where the trio of powerful weapons, including the Palyanitsia jet drone,
Neptune cruise missiles, and unmanned maritime combat systems struck air defense positions, military piers, and the port logistics network. A stern warning was sent to Moscow that the entire fleet and logistics infrastructure will never know peace as long as the flames of conflict continue. This attack is a link in the increasingly fierce chain of retaliatory strikes by Ukraine in response to the relentless missile assaults from Moscow, expanding the range to strike deep into strategic oil refineries and even massive logistics hubs like the Wyborsk commercial complex, turning Russia's rear areas into a fierce battlefield with no safe zones left. On a Mad Max battlefield at sea, Russia desperately set up nets to save its super oil tanker from the UAV storm. The picture of warfare on the open sea has transformed into a surreal scene, evoking scenes from post-apocalyptic Mad Max films as Russian oil tankers and port infrastructure have to wrap themselves in crude netting to defend against killer drones. Veteran maritime analyst Novorossiysk, the head of the Bosphorus Observer consultancy in Istanbul, captured a moment both ironic and astonishing as a supertanker left the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Strait with its command cabin completely wrapped in barbed wire netting, the deck covered with iron cages and both sides of the hull hanging with numerous makeshift water tanks to disperse explosive force. Another oil tanker on the sanctions list, the Roswell, also appeared in the Sea of Marmara in a similarly netted condition. The international press, especially the Financial Times, noted that the iron cage and anti-drone net structures, which are familiar sites protecting armored vehicles on land, have now officially spread to the sea, reflecting the constant fear of the unpredictable changes of asymmetric warfare. The appearance of these mobile steel fortresses originates from the most intense ship-hunting campaign launched by Ukrainian forces across the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, with the ultimate ambition of strangling the oil supply, the financial lifeline that nourishes Moscow's military machine. That battlefield upheaval created such a wave of chaos that top U.S. officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, had to speak out and urge Kyiv to restrain attacks near the transfer station of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium CPC complex at Novorossiysk port in order to protect the core interests of Western oil and gas giants. However, the fragility of this vital maritime route, which transports most of Russia's oil and Ukraine's grain, has caused widespread anxiety. Maritime transport market analysts at Argus, represented by expert Sheila Chatterjee, believe that a number of international ship owners have been forced to choose to remain inactive to avoid risks, rather than continue to gamble with their lives and assets amid the crossfire. Not only on civilian ships, but the defensive mentality has also turned the Novorossiysk military port into a chaotic fortress filled with obstacles. Images from Airbus satellites and open-source reconnaissance data have revealed a solid defensive system consisting of massive mesh frameworks, lock gates and barges lashed together, blocking the entrance to the naval port to prevent unmanned suicide boats. A desperate measure that has had to be maintained continuously for many months. Alongside the firepower front, the media and diplomatic battles have also erupted fiercely around the attacks on Novorossiysk. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova harshly accused Kyiv's campaign of being a calculated act intended to push the international food market into a spiral of crisis, serving the geopolitical schemes of Western powers. According to Moscow's argument, the destruction of the agricultural and fertilizer supply chains not only drives up global food prices, but also pushes poor countries in the global south and the east into the position of unwilling victims of an endless confrontation. The Kremlin is facing a collapse of trust and an atmosphere of fear as a series of cities unexpectedly turn their backs on Putin. Behind the solid walls of the Kremlin, an atmosphere of unease and calculation is gradually taking over as the curtain of power begins to show psychological cracks. According to in-depth analyses from the Times newspaper, President Vladimir Putin is urgently increasing the frequency of his domestic inspection tours with an unprecedented intensity, an obvious effort to salvage his declining approval ratings among the public under the burden of the prolonged conflict. This change in behavior is in stark contrast. Whereas in the past the Kremlin leader almost exclusively stayed in Moscow because of constant fears of assassination plots, he has now appeared in 6 major cities in a short span of time. Observers believe this is a media campaign aimed at closing the gap with the public and recreating the image of a powerful leader. Especially when data from even government-friendly polling organizations, Forbes pointed out that his approval rating has hit a low of 66%. The lowest level since the full-scale military campaign in Ukraine broke out. Some independent analysts even believe that the real figure among the public is much lower than that. The recent inspection trip to Novorossiysk became a typical example of Potemkin village-style staging, as the local authorities frantically repaved the asphalt, relaid the sidewalks, and trimmed every blade of grass right before his eyes. turning the cityscape into such a frantic construction zone that local residents sarcastically remarked the city seemed to have been completely rebuilt in just a few short days. For a centralized power structure, approval ratings are the measure of survival for the entire political system. Investigative journalist Farida Rustamova emphasized that approval ratings have long been regarded as the lifeblood of the entire ruling apparatus, where the entire administrative machinery runs at full tilt just to maintain the illusion of absolute unity between the leader and the people. The leader himself always believes that his direct presence will soothe all the worries in society, despite the fact that reality has repeatedly proven otherwise. Independent surveys by the Levada Center paint a contradictory picture of Russian society. Even though as many as 66 people surveyed expressed nominal support, but as many as 62 sincerely wish for peace negotiations to be initiated, while the proportion supporting continued fighting to the end is only 28, and for every 5 Russians, there is one who completely turns their back, indifferent to all developments in the conflict. Along with the wavering of social trust is the constant obsession with internal security, pushing Moscow's security apparatus into a paranoid defensive state against all potential threats to the regime. A report from the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, based in Amsterdam, shows that the Kremlin has activated the highest level of security alert in response to the risk of a coup or overthrow plot originating from within, from political elite factions inside Russia, especially amid fears of drone assassinations, to ensure absolute protection for key figures. The Federal Protective Service, or FSO, with a force of up to 50,000 personnel, has secretly expanded its elite Corps Guard unit from 785 to 812 agents, which security insiders confirm. The increase consists mainly of a unit of 27 top-tier drone combat and countermeasure specialists. This suffocating security clampdown was triggered right after the tragic death of Major General Fanin Savarov, a loyal veteran soldier who had experienced the battlefields of Chornaya, Chechnya, and Syria, who was killed in a horrific car bombing right in the heart of Moscow. From that moment on, all personnel working near the center of power were banned from using public transportation and mobile phones. Radio jamming devices operated at full capacity wherever the head of state was present, while the security team always carried special umbrellas made of Kevlar bulletproof fibers. So in your opinion, what can Russia do to avoid attacks from Ukraine? And how will the psychological instability in society and the suffocating security measures on the home front affect the situation on the battlefield in the coming period?